Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar on disruptive energy transition, opportunities for job creation, and electric mobility in the MENA region. I would like to welcome our panelists, our participants, and the event organizers. My name is Moez Sharif. I'm the program leader for infrastructure in Maghreb countries based in Morocco. And today's event is co-organized by the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco and the World Bank Group. So just a quick overview of the program. We will first have opening remarks by Paul Numba and Hisham El-Habti. I will introduce them in a minute. Then we will have a presentation by Mr. Ashok Sarkar on the employment benefits of the energy transition with focus on Morocco. We will then have a presentation from the University Mohammed VI Polytechnic on their clean energy roadmap. Thirdly, we will have a presentation on e-mobility in the MENA region by Yan Shaoli, and a final presentation by Mr. Abdel Ilah Rushd on e-mobility as well. We will end the session with question and answers, and I will provide some concluding remarks. So the whole thing will take hopefully a little bit less than 2 hours. So thank you for being here. Welcome again. And I will now introduce Mr. Paul Numba the Regional Director for Infrastructure Department in the MENA region at the World Bank. He will give the introductory remarks. Mr. Numba has extensive experience of more than 30 years in the field of infrastructure, policy regulation and finance, both also in telecommunications and private sector development. His most recent posts before this were as country director in Southern Africa and country director in West Africa before that. So without further ado, over to you, Paul.
Very good. Thank you very much, Moez, for the introduction. And also, I would like to take this opportunity as well to welcome our participant to this important webinar. It's also a word of thank you to my dear friend Hisham, who has kindly, with his team, agreed to have this joint event. I mean, this is the first event of a series of events we would plan to deliver over the coming months. We have an existing MOU that really is going to frame our collaboration going forward. So Hisham, thank you very much for making it possible. I have few points that I wanted to share with participants at the onset of this session. Since we're talking to a university, and also we're talking to university students and people who are engaging with the university, I thought I should relate to the employability and job opportunity on clean energy and energy transition. I mean, I just went back and spent some time getting through the IEA report, the International Energy Agency report on clean energy job that was issued a couple of months or years ago. And the report is very simple in the statement it brings forward. The energy sector as a whole represents 2% of the global workforce in the world, which is about 65 million employment positions. When you look at the distribution of this employment, 1/3 goes to the fuel supply sector, approximately 21 million. The power sector comes with 20 million jobs, and the end use, meaning the industries and other users of energy, employs approximately 24 million people. So across the value chain, the sector employs significantly a lot of people. And what is clearly important in that report is that 50% of the job in the energy sector today are in the clean energy value chain. And that's an important development. It was not the case 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. These jobs in the clean energy value chain are also highly qualified jobs, meaning that these are not like entry-level jobs where people have low skill. And these are also a sector that is seeing a high growth of employment opportunities. So what does that mean to us, policymakers? It means we need to quickly adjust our ability to supply the labor market with the right skills and competencies. And that's the reason why I believe the University Mohammed VI is well positioned to host this conversation, because you are at the end and at the beginning of a process of supplying the industry with the skills and competency that the industry will need to continue growing. And our partnership that we signed on May 17, for me, is built on that premises that the job market will be looking for more and more people in this area. And we need to multiply partnership in that regard so that at least we can also connect with the need of the market and allow you to achieve it. So when we signed our MOU, the idea was, at least between the World Bank and University Mohammed VI Polytechnic, was to promote joint research and joint analysis. The other idea was to disseminate the result of this research. And the third point was just to allow our people to know each other. And that's why on the World Bank side, we offered the possibility to host interns from the university so that they can demystify a little bit the World Bank. Because the World Bank belongs to all the citizens of this world, particularly from the developing world. And it's important for students who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow to know what the World Bank is and what they can do with the World Bank. So we are really here today, and I'm really pleased that we're going to be discussing these two reports that Moed introduced. The first one on employment benefit of energy transition, looking at Morocco, but we have also covered Tunisia, Egypt, and also Yemen. And I think the presenter, Ashok, could probably give you an indication about what came out from these other countries so that you can see how Morocco positioned itself. The other report will look at, the adoption deployment of electric mobility in MENA. Why should MENA countries pay attention or support or foster the deployment and adoption of electric mobility today? So all of that will be discussed as part of a presentation to come. For the next 6 to 12 months, we are also launching the preparation of 2 regional flagships. I just mentioned it here so that at least we can know what to prepare for and what we can probably work on together. We would like to do a regional flagship that will look at the economic and social benefit of high growth, clean energy trade and connectivity between MENA countries and Europe. I don't want to elaborate further, but this is already happening. We just signed last week in Tunis a World Bank loan to the government of Tunisia for the construction of a submarine cable between Tunisia and Italy. And the main purpose of that submarine cable is to allow Tunisia to be able to establish itself as a clean green energy hub that will be trading massively clean energy with Europe, particularly renewable energy, solar and wind. So we're going to do a report that will look at this and try to come up with a set of policy recommendations for leaders in our region to build on. The second report is really about connecting people in the region by fostering what we call the potential of regional high-speed rail. If we were to look at the lesson of EU integration, one key lesson from the EU integration came when the Erasmus program was established, allowing students from all EU countries to travel and undertake their studies in another country. Getting people to know each other is a very strong catalyst and catalyzer for promoting economic integration. And I think we would like to look at it through the rail connectivity. So we're going to do a report on that. And last but not least, I think the World Bank and IMF will be hosting their annual meeting in Marrakesh, October 9 to 13. I think, Isham, is an opportunity for us probably to organize one event there as well, We have a series of reports. You may have also some report on your side. We probably could come up with something that we could display or discuss. We can have like a panel or whatever during these annual meetings in Marrakesh, so that we can continue to showcase how our partnership is growing and developing. So let me just stop it there. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm really pleased and glad to be here today. Moez, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for these introductory remarks. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Hisham Al-Hafti, who is the president of the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University since 2020. He's leading the formulation and implementation of the university's vision and transformation. Mr. Al-Hafti holds an engineering degree from École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées in France, and he's also a graduate of École Polytechnique. Before this, I understand that he joined OCP back in 2013 and held leadership positions there. So over to you, Hisham. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Moez, and thank you, Paul, for your kind words regarding the partnership between UM6P and the World Bank. As you know, UM6P is really happy to collaborate with the World Bank Group Infrastructure Department to explore, as it was mentioned, the transformative power of this theme, which is the e-mobility in addressing global energy and transport challenges. And Paul shared with us a lot of very important insights regarding that. As you may know, at UM6P, we are committed to sustainable development and the Green Energy Park, and we will have the opportunity to hear from Professor Benzazoua how this affiliated platform is playing a vital role in shaping a greener and more sustainable energy landscape in Morocco. Really looking forward to what Professor Benzazoua will share with us. This webinar will focus, as it was mentioned, on the potential of e-mobility in Morocco, examining progress, challenges, and opportunities through cutting-edge research, demonstrations, and innovation projects. Our aim is to be at the forefront of driving e-mobility advancements here in Morocco. And we have a case study, which is the new city we are building in Ben Guerir, which the name is the Green City Mohammed VI, where we want it to be smart city, a green city, where the e-mobility is the way that will allow people to discover this new city with a heart, which is UM6P. It's a new city that will have between 80 to 100,000 inhabitants by 2050. So this is a real opportunity for us to implement what the research is giving us as outputs. Today, as you know, we confront the pressing challenge of reducing carbon emissions from the global transport sector, responsible for about 18% of human greenhouse gas emissions. The European Parliament's recent decisions to mandate zero-emission vehicles by 2035, which is tomorrow, sets a powerful example. Morocco, through various initiatives, policies, and mechanisms, is making part of this transition. Over 1,700 electrified vehicles and 14,000 hybrid vehicles have been registered, supported by 152 public charging points and 650 private charging points. UM6P and the Green Energy Park are actively promoting e-mobility through various projects, from R&D and demonstration to innovation, accelerating Morocco's transition towards a sustainable mobility future. And we will have, as I said, the opportunity to see all this work thanks to Professor Benzazoua's presentation. Just to finish, to collaborating with stakeholders such as the World Bank Group, let us pave the way for a clearer and more sustainable future, creating employment, which is very important, as Paul mentioned, these employment opportunities, and fostering technological breakthroughs. And during the annual meetings here in Marrakesh in October, yeah, we'll be more than happy to organize side events regarding this partnership we have in between UM6P and the World Bank. So together, let's inspire change, forge new alliances, and build a prosperous future. So thank you.
So thank you very much to Paul and Hisham for setting the stage for today's webinar. So we will now start with the first presentation by my colleague Ashok Sarkar on the employment benefits of the energy transition. So Mr. Ashok Sarkar is a program leader for infrastructure and a senior energy specialist, currently based in West Bank and Gaza office in Jerusalem. Ashok has, more than 25 years of experience in the energy sector in over 40 countries. He has worked previously is currently in the Middle East and North Africa region, and previously has worked in South Asia, Africa, and Latin America regions. Ashok is a mechanical engineer by training and has a master's degree in energy planning and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So Ashok, over to you for this first presentation. You have 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Moez. And I would now like to request my colleague Monia to load the presentation. I hope you can see the presentation slide. It's visible, I hope. So I think what we are going to discuss today is the issue of job creation through clean energy transition, which Paul mentioned in his opening remarks, that while the transition is taking place towards more renewable energy and energy efficiency in particular, more jobs are getting created, there are more opportunities, but also some jobs are getting lost. And what we have done in the last 3 years is some analytical work across 3 countries to understand what are the linkages between this transition and job creation, and through some modeling and economic analysis, which we are going to present. And then in the phase 2 of this work, which is the last year, what we have been doing is looking at the skills challenges which are required to deliver these jobs. And of course, when it comes to these jobs, there is a lot of attention being paid to not only youth who are getting educated, but a lot of women who would like to get into this clean energy workforce and currently are unable to do that in the proportion they should be. And so we try to understand what would it take to include the gender balance in these jobs. So let's go to the next slide, Munia. The presentation I start with this general overview. What these circles show on the left-hand side is that when you move from fossil fuel to clean energy, and particularly renewable energy and energy efficiency, for each $10 million spending, you get 3 times more jobs. While fossil fuel investment of $10 million would produce 27 jobs, at the same time, if it was replaced by renewables and energy efficiency, there'll be 75 to 77 jobs. And this is based on real numbers which came out of the post-COVID stimulus packages, which were distributed to many countries in Europe and United States, Australia, and even in the developing world. And the analysis is based on real numbers. And what it also shows in parallel, that there's a long way to go. Paul mentioned about the IEA report, and what I have mentioned here is the report on IRENA from Abu Dhabi, which also projected that there is about 30 million renewable energy jobs and 21 million energy efficiency jobs, which are possible if the transition continues at the same pace towards a 2 degrees Celsius environment in the future. And what we have done in this context is try to focus on developing world, because much of the studies and analyses which we have seen are available from the OECD world. So what we did is getting together with our education colleagues, our jobs colleagues, our social protection colleagues within the bank, and collaborating with international organizations like the ILO, UNIDO, IEA, IRENA, etc., in developing this Clean Energy Employment Assessment tool, CEAT. The CEAT actually calculates the direct, indirect, and induced jobs through renewable energy and energy efficiency technology penetration in countries. And what we have done is we have applied CEAT to Morocco and Egypt. And there was a separate analysis which we did for Yemen as well. And then we moved on to the phase 2 of the work, which is a deeper dive into the conditions which will deliver those jobs. So as I think Paul mentioned again, that enough green skills have to be available. Trained manpower, trained workforce needs to be there, which can actually capitalize on these job opportunities. Today, there's not enough number of institutions which are training people for renewables and energy efficiency future, and of course, hydrogen and e-mobility future. So what needs to be done is a lot of interactions and a lot of policy interventions, a lot of investments on the education side as well. And we try to dig deeper into that in the phase 2 of this work. And this was highly consulted with many stakeholders in Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Yemen as well. Let's go to the next slide. So very quickly, I don't want to go into the analytics of this. The jobs model CEAT is based on input-output model. Those of you who are economists, I'm sure, are very familiar with how each interventions in the economy can lead to macroeconomic effects, multiplier effects throughout the economy. And what we try to do is capture those impacts. And what we looked at is the expenditure on clean energy technologies, and then the energy expenditures which were going to be carried out with those new clean energy technologies and which were going to be replaced originally, which were being done by the conventional energy technologies. And what it does, it creates 3 different channels of jobs. Direct jobs, which results from the real investment. Indirect jobs, which is across the supply chain. And induced effects, which means people, when they have saved money and more jobs, they spend more money. And that creates this new income, creates more jobs. So we call that the induced effect. So we calculated these 3 channels of jobs while doing this analysis through a modeling framework, which was simply a spreadsheet model, easy to use, and will be made available by the bank, because this was funded by what we call the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program of the World Bank, which generously funded this for the 3 years, and will be available through that channel as well as the World Bank channel for other people to use and other countries to replicate this as well. Let's go to the next one, please. And again, there were 4 different ways of capturing these positive and negative impacts of job creation. Project investments obviously leads to more jobs, but then there's an investment shift away from fossil fuel sector, which means some jobs are lost. Then there is also energy savings through energy efficiency, which is spent, as I said, in terms of other services, which create more jobs. On the other hand, energy companies lose on revenues. When you have more energy efficiency, you have less energy production, therefore there is less revenues. So that leads to some jobs being lost. So the net impact is still, net jobs are higher than what we see in case of fossil fuel economies. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the Egypt number, but you can see we followed government of Egypt's targets. So we did not take any hypothetical numbers. We looked at what Egypt wants to do over the next 20, 30 years, how much renewables they are aiming for, how much energy efficiency they're aiming for. And there were 5 different technology pathways which were picked up in the case of Egypt. And this shows that there could be a significant number of jobs on an average every year produced just by these 5 technology pathways, not even the entire energy transition, but just the utility scale solar, distributed solar, residential rooftop solar, utility scale wind power, and building energy efficiency programs over the next 30 years, which they will be doing. And every year there'll be something like 67,000 new additional job opportunities just in these pathways. And that's, again, almost 2.2% of the unemployed workforce in Egypt today. Let's go to the next one, please. Morocco. Of course, Morocco was a country where we focused a lot. And we again looked at government of Morocco's targets, which were announced earlier by the government. And based on that, we picked up the 6 technology pathways: utility scale solar, distributed solar, residential solar, CSP, because CSP, of course, is one of the things which Morocco has been a global leader, and of course, wind and building efficiency. What we found in Morocco is an average of 25,000 additional job opportunities per year just in these 6 areas, which is around 8.5% of the annual job shortfall which Morocco has today. Let's go to the next one. So just to go a little bit deeper into the Morocco situation, I told you about those investment impacts, investment shift impacts, substitution impacts, and revenue impacts, the positive and negative impacts. So each of these, the model basically calculates in each of these technology pathways, these 4 impacts. So the net impact, which is the net jobs, is still a positive number, which is in the blue line and the subtotal line. Let's go to the next one, please. So the model also allows us to look at what if Morocco starts manufacturing a lot of things and stop importing? What if Morocco starts domestic financing and instead of getting money at a higher interest rate? What if you have more, the investment costs go up for various reasons, COVID and, the Ukraine war, the Russian war on Ukraine. I mean, there's so many reasons which are outside control, which will raise the investment cost. All those can be studied through a sensitivity analysis in this model. And it tells you what the positive or negative impact of those are. But anyway, even after modeling all that, you see the lowest and highest scenario, the last 2 rows, still shows a very high number of jobs getting produced, net jobs getting produced for each of these technology pathways every year for the next 30 years. Let's go to the next one, please. Again, Yemen, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip here. Yemen, we of course could not apply this model, but we did a much more deeper survey of the solar energy market in Yemen, which has actually taken over because of the conflict. The electricity grid is totally non-functional in all parts of Yemen. And as a result, you have a lot of private sector solar power being available, and it's growing quite rapidly. In fact, the World Bank is involved in 2 of the projects which looks at solar power deployment in urban and rural areas. And what we did is a survey of something like 100 companies in Yemen, which resulted in some results which are quite interesting. Almost 20,000 jobs being produced in the base case scenario of 2030. And if you now think about the increase in the solar power penetration, this could go up. If you add the productive jobs, which are resulting from the availability of electricity due to solar power, then you have another 10,000 jobs. So these 4 reports, let's go to the next slide. These 4 reports are available, as standalone reports and analyses, and we are happy to share these as we go along, and they will be made available on the website as well of the World Bank and SMAP program as well. Now, in the phase 2, the focus was on job creation and skills development. Let's, again, in the interest of time, maybe Munia, let's go to the Morocco slide. The Tunisia you've done, Morocco. So here, what we are finding is that even though we have this large number of jobs which are potentially available every year from now until 2030, if you follow the clean energy targets of the government of Morocco, there is always a scarcity of supply of workforce, green workforce, and highly skilled workforce. And sometimes, this has to be imported from outside. And that also, becomes sometimes a long-term feature, which results in the local infrastructure not getting developed in terms of more training facilities and education. So I think that what we found here is that there is a need for policies, there is a need for regulation, and of course there's a need for financing for job creation. Because unless all those basic building blocks are put in place, those jobs may not really be, they may not really result, they may not get delivered in the sense that they are projected. by us in our SEAT model, or by the IEA, or by the IRENA, or any other entity. So potentially there is a lot of work to be done to actually achieve those jobs in terms of green skilling. And that's where, of course, UM6P has a very, very critical role and has been really doing a stellar role in terms of training people for the future. And many of these are jobs which really require high-tech skills and not necessarily the traditional skills. And again, there is a lot of need to support small industries, because SMEs which work in the renewable energy and energy efficient sectors are the ones which is the highest employer. But yet SMEs have less access to finance. So unless we actually help those SMEs by financing them, they're not able to hire the right people. So I think there's a lot of those basic building blocks which are required in the energy transition business, which would then lead to the delivery of these jobs in the future. And again, this is something has to be done at all levels, not just graduate engineers and PhDs and masters, but also technicians, also people who do the O&M work for this, or even unskilled labor who are more used to doing traditional conventional power sector work, need to be retrained, reskilled, even through short-term programs to do more of the renewable energy and energy efficiency work. So all that needs to be done to again make the system work, the ecosystem work properly. Let's go to towards the very end of this. I think we have something on gender. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. So what we did along with this exercise is also look at the gender dimensions of these jobs, because when we look around in the MENA region, there is an equal number of women graduates who are coming out of colleges and technical programs, but they're not able to access the jobs. And you still see the numbers are quite skewed. Not on an average 20% in the MENA region. Morocco is slightly better than Egypt, of course, but yet there's a lot of room for improvement when you compare with OECD and other countries. Both in the case of renewable energy and less in the case of energy efficiency. Now, also we see that the differences in terms of the level of employment, as you go up the chain in an organization, you see less and less number of women who are there, but also there is a bias of not having women join as technicians, for instance. And again, there's a multiple reasons why there is this, I would say, imbalance. And we try to understand what are the opportunities and challenges and what could be done. This is my second last slide, which actually talks about the fact that women are qualified, competent, educated, equal numbers. What is happening is that with the lot of disruption going on in the energy sector, the digitization, digital tools getting in, artificial intelligence coming in, that is helping actually women participate more in this particular sector. That trend has already started, but yet there are challenges. There are some stereotypes which kind of leads to lack of female participation. Again, sometimes it comes from the cultural community and the family constraints as well, but also transport, for example, right? I mean, women find a job 20 miles away from their home, but there's no affordable transport to go to that job safely. So it is quite an ecosystem issue which needs to be taken care of to address some of these challenges and really make it more equal. And again, policies may be required, some investments may be required, particularly in childcare and other facilities next to the job. Otherwise, how would the woman do both the things, that they take care of the child at home but also work at offices? It's sometimes extremely difficult. And those are the policies which needs to be introduced more to make it more easy for women to participate in some of these job opportunities. And the recommendations is the last slide. Munia, yeah, that's the last slide. That we need to, of course, do the things which normally has to be done. A lot of social media and TV and communication campaign, but there has to be incentives. Incentives for employers and incentive for the decision maker who is going to hire the woman, in terms of empowering them to actually be able to hire more women and sensitize people right from the school teachers, not just the company managers who are going to be hiring people in the clean energy and renewable energy business, but everybody in the value chain have to be trained and oriented for this new future. I think I'm going to end there and may have gone overboard with my timing, This was a work done by a few of us who are named here, but we had a very large team of education sector experts, of social protection experts, climate change experts, and of course, many other colleagues in the infrastructure practice, which is headed by Paul in MENA. Many people participated. In fact, our colleague Moez and others who are on this call also advised us a lot while we were developing this work. And we will continue to disseminate this work, of course, through COP28, and that's the plan. Thank you very much once again, and happy Eid to everyone.
Thank you very much, Ashok, for this interesting presentation, for the detailed methodology, original methodology on calculating the impact on employment of the energy transition. So I would like to also encourage the audience to post their questions and comments in the chat. So now we go to Professor Mostafa Benzazwa, who will also be presenting on the clean energy from the Mohammed VI University. A few words of introduction. Professor Mostafa Benzazwa has a PhD in environment and geoscience from the University of Lorraine in France. He had a 25-year academic career at the University of Quebec before joining the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University as a full professor. He is now in charge of the Geology and Sustainable Mining Institute and acting as the Green Energy Park Platform's director. So over to you, Professor Benzazwa, and you have also 15 minutes. Thank you. No, you are on mute, Professor. Can you unmute?
So, thank you, dear Moez, Mr. Paul, Regional Director of the MENA region, and dear Hisham El-Habti. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. So I will present this in two parts. So the second part maybe will be done with my colleague, Dr. Rocht, who is with us. So let's start. The Green Energy Park, as you may know, belongs to the ecosystem of UM6P. It is located in Ben Guerir city, and it's a research center dedicated for advancing the energy transition through R&D, innovation, and demonstration. The main mission of the Green Energy Park are, first of all, applied research and innovation. We are, let's say, about 80 members, researchers, scientists, engineers. All are working together, and technicians, of course. All are working together to promote the research and development in the area of renewable energy. This is done with the collaboration of course, UM6P and Arizen, but also other national and international universities. The second mission is applied training. So while we are talking about employment and maybe the challenge to fit all the job creation that could be opened during the next decade around renewable energy. So the Green Energy Park is very involved in training at various level. Let's say PhD, master's degree in collaboration with UM6P, and also we are about launching in the ecosystem a BTS, which is a technician brevet, so brevet technicien supérieur, with let's say important goal in terms of number of students. Let's say about several hundred of students in the next 5 years around renewable energy. The last but not the least mission we have is business development with the creation of startups. So my colleague Rost will talk maybe a little bit about some of the startup we create or we are about creating. We are also it's worth to mention that we are working at a very wide range of technology readiness levels. So since 3 to 9, let's say, since we are involved in many industrial projects, in particular with our OCP group partner. So Green Energy Park is 3 departments. First one is solar PV. Is let's say the most important one. The objective of the research activity in this theme is to reduce levelized cost of electricity. This is the main goal: is to reduce the cost of energy while producing using this renewable energy, and to strengthen the integration and application of the photovoltaic in many applications. Then we have the smart grids, including the microgrid and the e-mobility. My colleague Rost will talk more about this topic. The second axis, let's say, is solar thermal energy with 2 objectives. The first one is the expansion of the scope of concentrated solar thermal energy technologies. And the second one is the improving the competitiveness and the impact of concentrated solar thermal technologies in Morocco. Let's say to adapt this technology to Morocco. The third department is dedicated to green building, energy efficiency, and modeling, simulation, and data science around energy. Beside this 3 departments, we have other departments dedicated for the first to valorization in the clean tech technologies. We have also, as I said, we are very involved in the training at various levels, and we have some commercial activities. I can maybe mention our involvement in the huge project of OCP in terms of solar energy in Ben Guerir or in other regions in Morocco. And we have also some commercial activities, mainly concerning the certification and conformity testing to test these technologies that could be imported, for example, here in Morocco, and to be sure that they are safe and durable. So with these research topics, we can cover a large area of domain. Here we have the list of all the topics. So we have solar photovoltaic, which is, let's say, the central activities we have at the Green Energy Park, and it could be related to all the other topics like concentrated solar power, smart grids, energy storage, both thermal energy storage and electrochemical storage. That include the battery recycling and so on, wind power, biomass energy production, hydrogen. We are also about launching many activities around this important area. Energy efficiency, green building for sustainable constructions, city of the future. Mr. Al Habti talked about this challenge for Ben Guerir, for example. but this is it is a challenge for other cities all around Morocco. The sustainable mobility. So my colleague will talk more about this. Water, energy, agriculture nexus, resource modeling, and digitalization. Just for the participant who don't know what is the Green Energy Park. A Green Energy Park is like two main platforms. First one is called Green Energy Park. It's the first one. It includes outdoor infrastructure and indoor infrastructure. We have all technologies in terms of solar energy production, all technologies around PV production, energy production. We have here the very recent micropilot for hydrogen production. We have another micropilot for biogas energy production and desalinization. And the second platform is called Green and Smart Building Park. It is the most recent platform, and it is dedicated to, as I said, to green building and smart grid optimization. We see here in the photo all the test field we have. We have the green tech test field. We have the geomaterials test field, and we have the third one. The third test field is dedicated to the iSmart startup that Dr. Roche will talk about. We have also here the village that contain more or less 40 small houses, all monitored, all could serve for research, for education, and for housing. And we have another view of this village here. And I will leave the floor to the next presenter. And then Mr. Roche will give you a talk about the electric mobility, more specifically and more technically spoken. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for this interesting presentation about the Green Energy Park of the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. It's really interesting, the connection with the previous presentation about job creation. So I guess the Green Energy Park must be playing a very important role in training, the people, some of the people who will work and lead these green energy jobs, but also testing the technology and the equipment so that it can play its full role in Morocco's economy. So we now move to our second topic, which is e-mobility in the MENA region. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Yanchao Li, who will present on e-mobility in the MENA region. Yanchao is an energy specialist in the MENA region of the World Bank. She has over 12 years of professional experience in energy policy and innovation management. She has a PhD from the University of Manchester in business and management and a master's degree in electrical engineering from Tsinghua University in China. Over to you, Yanchao. You also have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Moez. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for playing my slides. So I'll enter full screen mode and play it. It's really a pleasure to be able to face this very enthusiastic audience to present our newly completed project on unlocking electric mobility development potential in MENA, which is one of the two pillars under the same project as Ashok presented on disruptive technology and energy transition. So this project has benefited from generous funding from ISMAP, MOLO, and PF trust funds. And this is a joint across the World Bank Group team, actually, from energy, transport, digital, but also IFC colleagues. So here's a brief outline of the presentation. I'm going to summarize the project to give you a full picture of the deliverables, because time is very limited today. So if you are interested in following up to get the full reports, we'll be happy to have further exchange. And then I will present some overview of regional trends in MENA in terms of e-mobility, while presenting key findings from country deep dives, especially regarding Morocco, and then summarizing the policy takeaways. So this project on e-mobility, we had 5 components. It started from 2 years ago officially, and the Chapeau report really, it's trying to summarize the regional trend and status, and in terms of recommending the opportunities and the policy directions for the whole region. While benefiting from the 4 deep dives under the project, it does offer some cross-cutting observations across the region. But in order to go deeper, we realized we need to do country-specific deep dives in order to come across specific conclusions regarding technical analysis, financial competitiveness of EVs, and business model. What should each party play, private sector, public sector, and different policy options. And meanwhile, last but not least, is the mobile cooling deep dive, where we do realize that the hot climate in MENA region, especially affected by increasing climate change, the mobile cooling energy demands actually have huge impact on the battery range for EVs, and that need to be taken care of in a well-planned manner to maximize the performance for EVs. Now here are the 8 reports coming from this project. 5 of them have been designed and edited and expect to publish shortly over the summer, while the other 3 are still going through editing and designing, but focusing more specifically on private sector issues. And in particular for Morocco, it looks at data roaming platform to enable better utilization of renewable energy, which could be more technical and interesting for our university colleagues to look at. Now, why the focus on why the specific focus, right? Because we realized to go deeper in the analysis, MENA countries face that they have very diverse backgrounds and pathways and development models. So we chose initially Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan for deep dive, is because those countries, they had very explicit intentions to deploy e-mobility, but we did not observe very systematic policy actions taken at the outset of this project. And meanwhile, these 3 countries, in fact, they were later selected as the first batch of country climate and development reports, CCDRs. I highly recommend you to Google CCDRs for the 3 countries to have a sense that give more of a playbook in terms of how the country should go about in terms of coping with climate change challenges while maintaining development potential, right? The second, why the focus on public transport electrification. We do look at passenger cars electrification as well under this project, but mostly from a charging infrastructure need perspective. Why is that? Because we see the total cost of ownership for private passenger vehicles actually reducing very fast across the different countries, especially for those countries who are importing fuel to boost their traditional cars. They actually see more competitive advantage from EVs. That's why we focus more on e-buses and e-taxi fleet electrification, because they face more complex challenges in terms of route planning, higher upfront costs, and also business model adjustment, where you do need to kind of entertain with asset separation or even leasing models different from traditional structure. And also, we realize the electrification of public transport, it does result in higher social economic benefits, because the vulnerable groups, such as women and youth and the poor, they tend to use more public transport, rely on more of that. And then mobile cooling, as I explained, this is a warm region with a lot of consumption in terms of cooling side. Normally, we do not realize that when you have a full tank of fuel, but when it comes to battery range, where energy saving is very much a must, it needs to be taken into account. So the context, as mentioned, we realize MENA region it does feature very diverse urban settings. Cairo is different from Casablanca, from Amman in Jordan, right? We see very rapid urbanization and modernization, and we do see a growing middle class. They all want a personal vehicle, personal EV. We see a lot of congestion and emission of air pollutants in big cities. But meanwhile, we observe, especially as the World Bank operations team, we observe there's a very slow and profound challenging context in terms of developing integrated public transport, especially massive transit. According to the stats back in 2020, we see the uptake of EVs was still focused on East Asia and Pacific, which is also the fact nowadays. I bet other countries, other regions have been picking up a little bit on different modalities of EV. We see MENA has been still in the range of tens of thousands in terms of private passenger EVs, and for e-buses still at hundreds level. A few examples or data points to get a sense. We do see over 100 e-buses were locally produced and mobilized in Morocco, and we do see, as we hear from our colleagues, that there are a lot of very active corporate level and national level initiative in terms of boosting charging infrastructure using renewable energies in Morocco. And meanwhile, we see some other countries like Egypt and Qatar, they also launched a bigger procurement for e-buses, while in the rest of the region, it's very minimal. For example, in Jordan, they have only 2 e-buses on the road, while the other 15 are still being procured, prolonged process. And then what are the factors affecting the attractiveness? We still see the main issues are still like there are regulatory challenges and economic factors, of course. Battery range is a key constraint and key worry, and charging infrastructure is the utmost constraint for all kinds of modalities except 2 to 3-wheelers, where you can just accommodate using normal supply. So the key drivers for the region, we summarize, there are about 8 key drivers for governments to look at e-mobility very seriously these few years. Jobs and employment, as elaborated by our colleagues in this session already. We do see ambitious targets set by, for example, Morocco, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. They have local and manufacturing initiatives, and that could present opportunity for economic structural change. And we do see a lot of synergy with renewable generated electricity, whose price is also declining very rapidly. That gives a lot of momentum, especially for few importing countries, to benefit from their oversupply of renewables and benefit from cheaper electricity and boost the utilities' financial performance. So this is very much in line with what we observed across the different countries in the world. So MENA countries, we do see a clear pattern between those oil importing and oil exporting countries in terms of the momentum on e-mobility. We do see the GCC countries, they are more proactively diversify their economic structure. That is a main driver. It's less of a cost issue. But in Jordan, we see fuel price, Jordan and Morocco, in fact, fuel price has been really putting a strain on consumers, and that's a key driver for looking more seriously at the EVs from consumer perspective. And now we want to present a little bit findings on the TCO comparison, especially drawing on the difference between financial versus economic TCO, total cost of ownership, for the 3 deep dive countries. We see for oil importing countries like Morocco and Jordan, in fact, regulatory and contractual factors could be very important in terms of bringing down the total cost of ownership. For example, if the regulatory framework allows EVs to operate for a longer time, for example, 15 years versus 12 years for ICE vehicles, that could be a better chance for EVs to be more competitive. And the mere constraint here, as we know, EVs, they have less moving parts, so they could have lower maintenance costs and lower risk of falling apart, except the battery range part. So that's why the contractual arrangement and the business model come into play, where negotiations with manufacturers might be useful to have warranty to ease the anxiety around the battery life. While in the context of Egypt, where we see they are still enjoying cost competitive fossil fuel, especially CNG, they are looking at that very seriously. So there is less of an advantage for battery electric vehicles to be financially competitive. When it comes to economic TCO, the picture is actually the case for EVs is even stronger for Morocco and Jordan because environmental and social benefits are taken into account. While for Egypt, we can see the CNG is still very competitive, while EVs, it's becoming, the case is stronger, but it's not as clear-cut as CNG vehicles. That's why it's very much understandable for the government to look at different options, especially in the longer term in terms of infrastructure building, whereas it's fueling or charging infrastructure, or both, in fact, and serving different kind of fleet. So what could happen in Morocco in terms of future uptake of EVs? We try to do some modeling at the outset of this project, and we realized this might be a very conservative estimation. So in our basis scenario, we estimated probably Morocco can reach about 7% of total stock of EVs by 2035, because back then we see very few vehicles on the road. But then we realized with the multiple policy incentives, a lot of announcement from also the private sector and the charging infrastructure provider, and also very much in line with the new roadmap published in Morocco, we see a 10% or 11% range could be very realistically achieved if the pattern of policy actions continue towards 2035. Now it comes to the impact of mobile cooling. So we did specific modeling on the impact of mobile cooling or mobile air conditioning MAC in terms of optimization. What could happen? We realized the mobile cooling could actually eat up about a third, like 31% of e-taxis battery range in Casablanca if we don't do anything in terms of making the mobile cooling more efficient. In Rabat, e-buses is about 9% of the consumption. And if we let everything unplanned in terms of mobile cooling, the 84,000 e-taxis in the modeling could increase 8% of the total consumption of electricity for Casablanca. But in the optimization scenario, efficient scenario, if we do very simple interventions as easy as more shading for parking, some zonal cooling or seat cooling, or even window glazing, a lot of energy consumption can be saved from the cooling front. It can lead to up to 30% saving of peak load, and it can lead to up to savings in terms of investment on the distribution network level. Now, finally, the three policy pillars we want people to take away, like go away with these three key categories of policy pillars we are thinking. One is on the national adoption, sectoral integration, and service formalization. This should be considered, e-mobility uptake could be considered as part of the bigger sectoral reforms, for example, in transport sector, and also in terms of standardization and labeling and concerning mobile cooling. Those can have a major impact in terms of streamlining the process for end consumers and encourage model shift if it's coupled with mass transit reforms. A second pillar would be charging infrastructure and the synergy with renewable energy sources, where we see the declining price is presenting very much advantage, but meanwhile the managing of the network, managing of the grid is becoming more challenging for utilities. So how to increase the interoperability? That's also one thing we are looking at now closely with Mason and the other stakeholders in the context of Morocco, and how to incorporate the grid impact study of EVs as part of the master planning, and how to ensure the infrastructure enhancement is spot on, necessary but not wasteful. And third pillar would be more on the incentive package part. Here we do acknowledge that we understand the physical space for most of MENA countries are very limited. The government simply do not have much space to do physical support for end consumer EVs. But here, a clear gap is for e-buses. Not necessarily saying the financing should come from public sector, but more attention should be paid in terms of incentivizing the scale of e-buses to break through the initial stage of adoption. These include, but not limited to, for example, signaling of pricing for electricity for charging for bigger buses, for BRT, and also any requirement on OEM, original equipment manufacturers emissions, and parking, and also tariff signals. Finally, just to acknowledge the full team. This is not the full team, as also Ashak said, because we have so many components and the project, but our core team and the Morocco country team, as well as the consulting firms are acknowledged here. Thank you very much. If you have any questions that you after the webinar, feel free to send an email to me.
Thank you so much, Yan Chao. This very good overview of the World Bank study on e-mobility in the MENA region. So we will stay with this theme of e-mobility, and now bring in Mr. Abdel Ilah Rushd from the Mohammed VI University Polytechnic. Mr. Rushd is the Research and Development Project Manager in charge of smart grids and e-mobility at the Green Energy Park in Ben Guerir that we discussed earlier on. So before that, Mr. Rushd was at the Research Institute, IRSN, and he's an engineer from the NSET Institute in Mohammedia. So over to you, Abdel Ilah, and you have 15 minutes. After that, we will go on to the question and answers session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Miles. Thank you for all the previous colleagues for their presentations. So as Mr. Mustafa Mzazoua presented the activities and infrastructures of Green Energy Park, the second part is to give an overview about the e-mobility situation in Morocco. And before this, I would like to give you an overview of the decarbonization goals, global decarbonization goals regarding the different sectors, including the transportation. So as you may know, notice in this slide, there's by 2050, there's some sustainable development scenarios in order to offset the carbon footprint. There's three main scenarios according to the International Energy Agency: 6 policy scenarios, sustainable development, and net zero energy. And as you may notice here in this chart, the transport sector in the yellow color, it is responsible for a huge amount of CO2 emissions. And for the 3 scenarios, it is this sector should offset the carbon footprint by 2050. The sector of transportation is responsible currently of about 7.7 gigaton per year of global greenhouse gas emissions, corresponding to about 18% of global emissions. And by 2050, it is forecasted that the passenger transport demand will be doubled, and the freight transport will be tripled, which will double the global emissions regarding the CO2 emissions. And on the other hand, we found that countries from around the world are committed to limiting the global warming, including Morocco has signed on the Paris Agreement. And for this, the global transport must reduce each year about 3 gigaton per year. And for this, we can find electric vehicles as a solution. By the way, the European Parliament agrees that all new vehicles in Europe will be zero emissions and will be here in Morocco impacted by this transition, as we have a lot of trades between Europe and Morocco, and not only impact but will be involved in this transition. Electric vehicles can for the sustainable development, sustainable policies, and sustainable development scenarios will contribute to reduce from 1/3 to 2/3 greenhouse gas emissions. For the EV markets, like for the recent figures, we find that according to International Energy Agency, that only in 2022, like 10 million electric vehicles have been sold, and the figures will grow exponentially in the next following years. On the other hand, we find that there is a supporting charging infrastructure, also the fast chargers and slow charger, a total global total of about 3 million charging points across the world. And we should highlight that transport electrification is not only about cars. Like in 2022, for example, cars represented only about 40% of this global sales, but also we talk about 2-, 3-wheelers, buses, and trucks. For Morocco, for the Moroccan context, we find that there is a lot of good indicators that show that we are in the good direction to we're in the transition to electric mobility. There is some policies, mechanisms, and initiatives that have been launched by Morocco. For example, some financial and non-financial supports in order to support the electric vehicle adoption. For local manufacturing, we have now the EV charging stations that are designed and fabricated in Morocco, but also upcoming project regarding electric vehicles that will be designed and also manufactured in Morocco. And you must see recently the announcement of the gigafactory of batteries with some Chinese partners. For electric vehicles, currently, only in 2022, this last year, we have registered an important amount of electrified vehicles, between EVs and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And our charging network is supporting this transition. Also, just 5 years ago, there was no infrastructure for this, but now we're talking about 700 charging points, between private and public, and this this number is set to be doubled and tripled in the next following years. There are some scenarios for electric vehicles adoption by 2030, optimistic and intermediate and pessimistic scenario. And in all cases, we should anticipate and prepare this transition in order to meet at least the intermediate, or why not the optimistic scenario. At the Green Energy Park, we're conducting different types of initiatives and activities in order to promote this topic and this field in Morocco. The first project that I would like to share with you, it is the e-mobility roadmap project that consisted in 2 phases. The first one consisted of developing comprehensive overview and market of electric vehicle and charging infrastructure in Morocco. And the second one consisted on making some analysis, internationally benchmarked EV and charging roadmap for Morocco, by doing some recommendations for different types of stakeholders. And for this study, we had the involvement of many public and private stakeholders, all the concerned ministries have been involved in these studies, but also the private stakeholders represented by the different federations, associations in Morocco, concerned by the topic. And the project is led by CGM, which is the Confédération Générale des Entreprises Marocaines, which represents the private sector. Green Energy Park, ONE, which is the grid operator, and the agency, Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency, and was funded by the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. So we concluded different types of recommendations regarding the value chain, the governance, regulatory framework, and incentives, and the next steps for EV and charging and EV charging. that are like summarized here, but the report will be published for publicly like soon. We have made like result presentation within CGM with the presence of the different stakeholders to present internally the results of the study. But as I said, like the results will be publicly available. We're also like conducting, as Mr. Benzazoha like mentioned, like different types of activities, like from research and development, demonstration to innovation, but also like deployment of technology and adoption. For example, we have deployed the first charging network of electric vehicles like in 2017 in the Moroccan highways. It was the first pilot that has like encouraged the adoption of electric vehicles in Morocco, and we have seen later like many other initiatives of developing some private charging networks. We're working actually like currently on the urban version of this program. Like we're going to distribute about 100 charging points across Moroccan cities for different types of beneficiaries. This was for charging infrastructure development, but also we are working on product development. Like the eSmart is a startup that is emerged from the Green Energy Park and UM6P ecosystem, and it is 100% like designed and manufactured in Morocco. And now the colleagues like have certified and completed the first version for normal charging, 22 kilowatt, and are in the process of certifying the fast charger, like starting from 50 kilowatt up to 150 kilowatt. Yes, we develop also like with our engineers and researchers some mobile applications for charging point mapping, supervision, and e-payment. This is very important in order to prepare the transition. Like also like some roaming platforms that should be developed in Morocco in order to ensure the interoperability between the different like suppliers, different types of chargers in Morocco. Another type of project we're working on that is making part of the urban like planning. It is called EV Plan, like a bilateral project between Morocco and Spain, and it consists of developing an advanced geographic information system that is meant to map the different KPIs, technical, socioeconomic, and also environmental KPIs. And through an optimization process, it will be identifying the most suitable locations in order to develop the charging infrastructure in Morocco, like including different types of KPIs, as I mentioned, including, for example, the electrical installation of the electrical grid, including the traffic, including the services locations, and also like income, GDP, and so many other KPIs. Yes, we're working also, as I mentioned, on technical support for different type of stakeholders in order to help them planning the different like electric vehicle fleet, but also the charging infrastructure. And also like we're working on some projects that have a socio-scientific aspect, like we're distributing some electric vehicle fleets, like electric cars, electric 2- and 3-wheelers, but also like three-wheelers for different type of associations and local authorities. And we're like having the data, like the different data from the ground, in order to make some, as I mentioned, some socio-scientific studies with some recommendations. Moroccan Solar Race Challenges, we have organized about 6 editions in order to for students from around the world, designing and fabricating solar electric cars to make a trajectory like with about some hundreds of kilometers in order to help promote this topic in Morocco. Like talking about ground-informed or ground-based studies, like I would like to mention that we have recently published a publication that I advise you to consult on public charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, like comprehensive analysis of charging patterns and real-world insights, in which like we have gathered about 3,000 like charging events for public charging stations in Rabat, and we have analyzed them like different types of analysis, energy-based analysis, time evolution assessment, but also like the behavior characterization of the usage of charging points, and we have come out with some like real-world insights and recommendations for different types of stakeholders. So this was all for all the interested people. I invite you to contact me or to contact the director of Green Energy Park regarding e-mobility, and we will be so glad to collaborate together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abdelilah, for this very interesting presentation, quite complementary to the one made by Yan Chao before that. So, you know, the first one was focused on the MENA region. I think you presented, you first gave a global perspective and then zoomed in on Morocco. So it is now time for our question and answer session. We've had some very interesting some very interesting questions for the audience that I would like to direct to our panel. So maybe a first batch of questions for Ashok on the question of you know of the link between energy transition and jobs. There was a very interesting question on the quality of jobs. So how can we ensure that these are, you know, high quality rather than, you know, temporary jobs in the renewable energy sector, and that they have a positive impact on the local population? And then there was a specific question on the number of jobs that could potentially be created through the energy transition in Morocco by 2030. So maybe we start with Ashok, and then we will go to some other questions more focused on e-mobility.
Sure. Thank you, Moez. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, very well.
No. I think you absolutely are right. This is a very, very interesting question, and absolutely converting the temporary jobs in both renewable energy and efficiency to more sort of long-term sustainable positions is, of course, I mean, very important to promote a kind of a stable and robust workforce, because we don't want a temporary workforce. So I think a few things come in our mind based on the work which we have done in these 3 countries in the MENA region. I think there have to be interventions both on the supply and demand side of the industry, but also the collaboration with non-industry players, which actually helps convert these temporary jobs into long-term positions. So since we are with our esteemed colleagues from UM6P, I would focus more on the first point, which is the training and education, training, retraining and reskilling programs, and certification and standards. Industry-wide certification is very, very important to ensure the quality and expertise of renewable energy professionals, as well as energy efficiency professionals. So what you see around the world in the OECD countries, the energy efficiency sector employs very high-skilled jobs because there are many such training certification programs. So certification given by the Association of Energy Engineers, certification given by the Efficiency Evaluation Organization are very prestigious, and those leads to employability and provide the employers with the confidence of hiring workers for long-term positions. So I think that kind of exercise has to be done. And along with that, we need the industry growth and diversification, because we have to have localization of the manufacturing processes. Those are the good quality long-term jobs. If you rely too much on imports, then the jobs will continue to be temporary. So there has to be a move towards more local opportunities, more diversification of the market in terms of local production. And incentives, again, might sound trivial, but initially we need supportive policies and incentives for all this to happen. To create an incentive for industry to hire permanent jobs, either as a mandate or as an incentive, is very important. Governments give tax breaks, grants, low interest loans, financial incentives to companies that commit to hiring and retaining certain percentage of their workforce in sustainable positions. So I think those are the kind of actions we found in our analyses and in our assessment across these 3 countries. And I think, again, the educational institutes, the research and development institutes like UM6P have a very critical role in this ecosystem for creating long-term renewable energy jobs. I hope I have answered the question, but maybe we can have someone from UM6P also add to this later on. And going to your, should I go to the next question, Moez, or do you want me to wait?
Yes, please. Yes, I think I've already posed that question.
So again, the next question, I wouldn't claim to give you the exact number of what it is, like how many jobs will be there. But as Paul had mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, that right now there are about 65 million jobs in the energy sector. About a third of them comes from the fuel supply, about a third of them from the power sector, and the remaining is within the industrial area, vehicle manufacturing, energy efficiency, etc. The end-use jobs, as we call them. Now, what is happening is that the total number of jobs are not going to increase dramatically because more jobs are increasing in the renewable energy sector. So IEA and IRENA both have estimated roughly 30 million renewable energy jobs by 2030 and about 20 million energy efficiency jobs by 2030. Now, 30 million of those renewable energy jobs are actually coming from the shift from the fossil fuel jobs, which were shown out of that 65 million figure. So what is happening is the total number may not become from 65 to 100 million. It will go from 65 to 75 million because there's a lot of job shifts taking place within that number, total number, from fossil fuel and traditional conventional power sector to more of the renewable energy and energy efficiency sector. So I would say, based on what we have seen, the ranges, it's somewhere between 65 to 75 million jobs will be there in the energy sector, but more than 50% of that, maybe even higher, like close to 2/3, would be from renewable energy and energy efficiency. Those are the estimates we get from many of the macro global studies which we have seen around so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashok. So I guess you gave the response from a global perspective. Okay, so here we can see another question. So this is regarding the field of electric mobility. So the person is saying that they operate in the field of electric mobility and charging stations for two-wheel vehicles. So how could they get help to finalize their prototype and go for patenting? So probably, I mean, this is a natural question for our friends at the Green Energy Park.
Thank you, Moise. Thank you, Mr. Ben Sliman, for this very pertinent question. To answer, maybe we need to know where you are about your project. What is sure is that the ecosystem in Ben Guerir, so let's say the UM6P ecosystem and the Green Energy Park are working hard to help, let's say, innovative technology to be maybe launched as a startup. So, for example, for instance, in UM6P, there are two tools that could help in implementing such kind of project. We have the first one called Stargate, a good program, very recent and good program, and the other one is UM6P Venture. It's like venturing for startup. So if our participant need to have more information, maybe he could contact us and we can guide him. Maybe I can say that in Ben Guerir, for instance, there is already one small company that is trying to build this kind of infrastructure for two-wheels vehicle, and so it's in the starting point, but since the electric mobility in Morocco is at the beginning, let's say, so this kind of project maybe contain some risk, because maybe Morocco is not yet very ready for this, but this is the moment for this kind of project. I don't know if Rosh can complement.
Yes, Mr. Mustafa, thank you for your inputs. Yes, I would like just to confirm that there's many entities here in the ecosystem of UM6P that are accompanying the different startups, but also like there are some programs of IRISEN also that are like, for example, accompanying startups like from early funding up to like accelerating the startups. For this project, I will recommend you to contact us to give you more details about the process for example, for patenting and beneficiating from the funding.
Thank you. So maybe we move to the next question. So the next question is, how can transport electrification be considered as a key policy action to support MENA ambitions in MENA countries? Who would like to take this question? Yeah, maybe
I'll take this one. I will have a try, but while acknowledging actually Ashok and Maria and Christine, who are all connected, they are also on our e-mobility team. And of course, the very rich knowledge from our Green Energy Park colleagues. So how can that be considered as a key policy supporting country ambitions, right? So I find this is a very interesting question, because in our operations and client dialogues, we do see this tricky positioning of e-mobility. It's not purely energy, it's not purely transport, it's not purely environment. So when it comes to the line ministries where they are comfortable in terms of working in silo traditionally, now they have to come together, and how to bring the different sectors together and really position transport electrification as a top national priority. We see it work effectively when the top level policymakers or decision makers of a country can send strong signals that this would be a priority. For example, the monarchy in Jordan, in a recently announced economic modernization vision, that e-mobility appears in several pillars. It contributes to green pillar, a jobs pillar, and power sector and all that. So it sends strong signal, and that will channel down to different line ministries in terms of coming across more detailed planning. For example, in energy sector, in the master planning, the utilities need to factor in EV uptake, while in transport sector, you need to consider fleet upgrading and consolidation of different fragmented subsectors to enable the uptake of e-mobility. So to summarize, an effective approach could be really for the policy to come from top-level economic decision-making bodies, while channeled down to the technical line ministries, and that will play out more like a matrix of strategies and planning, instead of just a sectoral strategy, which we don't see that would work very effectively, given you have all the constraints presented by related sectors. and different levels as well, channel down to urban level, city, municipality. They are all very powerful when it comes to transport policy implementation. So I don't know if the rest of the team want to add anything from the bank side. Thank you.
Thank you, Yan-Chao. Maybe just to add real quick, in terms of impact of electrification of the transport sector, of course, we know, like in terms of, GHG reduction ambitions of countries, it's not the only way. There's motorization management. There's a lot of policy actions that need to be done on the energy sector side as well. But we've seen in many studies and the work that we've been doing in developing countries and in MENA that electrification of transport is one of the policy actions that can have the biggest impact. So it's very important and can support the ambitions of the countries. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to the next question, which is asking about the main challenges of e-mobility facing the MENA region, which was the topic of the presentation. But specifically, how can universities and corporations support this roadmap or agenda?
I will try again, Moise, if that's okay with you. So for the challenges, in our newly finished Chapeau report, we have summarized a comprehensive list of challenges and potential mitigation strategies specific for the MENA region. But here I'd like to name a few categories of challenges as a key takeaway. So notably, we see the financial challenges, especially for the larger vehicles, upfront investment that is put off a lot of interest. Second would be the technical challenges, where we acknowledge charging infrastructure is not fully at scale, and the battery range is improving, but not fast enough as people's demand. And third challenge would be more on the regulatory side, standardization. At some point, government need to be comfortable in terms of picking different technological options, different standards, and then that's not becoming a barrier or constraining the progress of the sector. And finally, very importantly, and also tricky to deal with, is more on the political economy side. What about the revenues the government rely on in terms of collecting from the fossil fuels revenues, right? What about the existing gas station owners? So we see a lot of countries are trying to work with those type of stakeholders to actually build on the existing structure and make the stakeholders work together and the innovative business models. So to overcome that challenges, a lot of trial and error need to be done in order to exercise different mechanisms. And that's where universities and corporate really can come in. That's my personal opinion, but our university colleagues are here already. So Professor Mustafa, feel free to correct me. We see a lot of interesting models in terms of university and industry collaboration to stimulate technology innovation and uptake across the world. One example would be Willow in South Africa. Very interesting. It's a startup fund. It's a platform for innovation and for knowledge transfer, where different parties can work together in one spot. So it's very much streamlined. A similar concept would be Center of Excellence, that we see a lot of universities, they have the support from industry and government to put together those kind of platforms where policy incentives, small grants, and technology support from students and researchers can come together. So this is also related to questions 5 and 8, the other two questions regarding SME support, right? So that's where I think really the industry and university can come in to bridge the niche. Comes down to Morocco context. I think what is interesting to look at is we know the government has ambitious targets in terms of manufacturing and talking about the abundance of minerals in the country and potential manufacturing of batteries. What about a few niche topics? What about battery recycling and second life? That could be a major market. And people need to think, the universities and industry need to think ahead of that to come up with prototype and that enable further investment and scaling up. That will be really promising. That will have impact on future resource sufficiency and also jobs and skills in front. And talking about skills, that's another function that I think university can really come into play, to train tailored skill sets and labor force to come into the market. So there's a closer articulation between supply demand needed. So not just train the PhDs because this topic is interesting, but also see where the gap is, where the need is in terms of market uptake. I'll stop here. I don't know rest of the panelists want to chime in or not. Thank you.
Thanks, Yan-Chao.
Maybe I can compliment.
Yeah, why don't you come first? And I just have a small point. Maybe I will add to this.
Hold on. Maybe we go to Professor Buzazwa first, and then you can come in very briefly, because then we move to the next question.
So I think my colleague from the World Bank explained all these challenges, and maybe the complexity and the challenges to have the universities involved in such let's say big challenge of our century. Maybe in Morocco we must maybe mention that maybe electric mobility is still needs some help, some guideline from the government, since as you may know, in Morocco nobody can sell the energy using charging battery and so on. So maybe one of the urgent action that the government can take to promote electric mobility is maybe to liberalize all this energy, maybe and these startup that could grow around the topic. So this is a very important action to be done to help in promoting the electric mobility. About university involvement, UM6P, as we show through the Green Energy Park, is working hard in this topic, and we still available to work with other partner. We have some contact from let's say the oil company that want to have this kind of markets, and they are interested about what we are doing, but maybe it's early. It's too early to have a strong collaboration between the industry and the universities in that topic.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's move to the next question, because I'm conscious that time is running out, and we still have a few questions to go through. So this question is about with the transfer of skills and trainings in the field of renewables, can we expect to see made in Morocco electric vehicles, I guess, or any technology related to e-vehicles? So I don't know, maybe Ilah, or who would like to address this? What are the prospects for having for manufacturing e-vehicles in Morocco?
Excuse me. Yes. So, I think there's many mechanisms here in Morocco being made in order to encourage the made in Morocco. Regarding the e-mobility sector, we started seeing charging points developed from scratch here in Morocco, and also some electric vehicles. Also, we start with AMI, which is a very small vehicle that is adopted by the Bank. It is a bank that is adopting these cars for transporting for transportation, and also many electric vehicles manufacturers are planning to start manufacturing locally the electric vehicles, but also like the battery manufacturing. As I mentioned, like Morocco has announced a gigafactory that will be manufacturing batteries in Morocco. Yes, maybe like we will host some international partners here in Morocco to develop some project, but also like I believe in the Made in Morocco. There is many programs from the government in order to help entrepreneurs and researchers like take innovation to the next level in all sectors, like mainly for the energy transition. Also, there is some dedicated program for this, and including electric mobility for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Should we move to the next question? Okay. So what are the future trends and developments that we can expect to see in electric mobility sector in Morocco, and how can stakeholders prepare for them? So maybe, we have covered partly, but it's good to. I think it's an interesting question.
Yes, I think like regarding this question, as it is like requesting the development and next step for electric mobility in Morocco, and how stakeholders like we will prepare for this. I think like the initiative of making the electric mobility roadmap is a first like initiative that is gathering all the relevant and concerned stakeholders in order to start working together on this field and like treat different topics regarding governance, regarding the regulatory framework, which is very important, as Mr. Benzazou said, like which we need to have like a very clear regulatory framework and to have like liberalized the electricity market in order to start like seeing private and like private companies for example private charging operators, and also like I think in the next following years like we will have we will see the creation of different entities and association that will lead this sector. We have seen like the creation of APIM, which is the intersectorial association for electric mobility that is gathering also many types of stakeholders and are to advance this in Morocco. And it has set a goal by 2026 to install about 2,000 charging points in Morocco. So it is a very ambitious target for charging infrastructure development, but also like for the different value chain of electric mobility.
Thank you. Maybe any quick perspective from the World Bank on this, or Professor Benzazou?
Yeah, maybe just add to resources are also very important. Maybe battery is the core of this business, and as Roche say, we will have a gigafactory, but the sovereignty of resources that could be used for battery manufacturing is very, very important. This is why there was a very recent report from CESE, who is in charge of helping the government in ensuring sovereignty in terms of critical and strategic resources. And maybe Morocco must secure some resources to like lithium, like phosphate. So there is no problem with the phosphate, but lithium, cobalt, and so on. So this is very important point. And the second one is the recycling. So we have to continue the chain value with the possibility of recycling all this battery at their end of life. This is very important to answer sustainability of the electric mobility in Morocco.
Thank you. Ashok, maybe a quick word.
Just a quick word. I think referring to the previous two questions, I think one of the trends which we have seen emerging in countries which have done electric mobility quite well, including China and India and Norway and other countries in Europe, as well as California in the US, is bringing together the players. I mean, it doesn't happen automatically, because we know that the value chain includes a variety of diverse activities, batteries and electricity charging infrastructure, which is the electric utility industry on one hand, and then the vehicle manufacturers on the other hand. I think that's the challenge, that how do you bring them together along with academia? And what we have seen emerging is what we call the Sectoral Skills Council. Now, what they do is it's an alliance between companies and academia. And they come together, and they don't necessarily have a long-term 4-year, 5-year program for trained people, but it's more focused on reskilling and retraining. So one question was, the renewable energy training is already going on. How do you add on the electric mobility module onto that, which is quite different? Because battery manufacturing, battery maintenance is a very different skill compared to solar panels. So I think that alliance is the first step. And I think, again, nothing is free. It costs money to set up that infrastructure and that system as well. As Professor Mustafa was saying, that it requires investment. Somebody has to put in time and resources to make that happen. Industry alliances don't happen by themselves. And I think it is a very complex industry, the e-mobility. I think that needs to be taken care of before, again, we talk about capturing these jobs. There are plenty of jobs which will come, but we don't have the building blocks yet to achieve those job numbers. And I think that's where this webinar is extremely important, because this is one step where many of the audience today, panelists, are from the private sector. And I'm sure they're listening to Professor and Abdullah as well. And I'm sure they're going to come back to you with ideas of how to set up alliances. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashok. I wonder if we have, do we have a last question or from the audience? I don't know if they're usually projected. But Maria, did you want to make any statement? We have, if you want.
Well, no, thank you very much, Moed. I think that Yan Chao covered very well the point on mobile cooling, which is the part that I've been more involved in this study. And of course, my contact is on the presentation, so feel free to contact me if you have any concern or question on that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, thank you. I think I saw one question from the audience about the shift from fossil fuel, that some people working in the area of fossil fuels may lose their jobs because of the transition to renewable energy. And so what can we say about that? Right, exactly. This is now projected here. So does the energy transition really mean that necessarily that people who work in fossil fuel value chain will lose their jobs, or perhaps are there solutions for retraining and providing new opportunities for them? Perhaps Ashok, any insights from the on this, and then this will be the final question.
No, very short response. And I think this is an absolutely fundamental question of what we call the just transition. Is the transition being done in a just manner, in a fair manner? And many of our partner countries, like the big coal-focused countries of South Africa and India and China, are facing that issue. But what we are seeing is that if you put the right policies and incentives of retraining and reskilling in place, then those jobs are not lost. Because at the end of the day, most of us, when we were in college, not the younger colleagues, but the older colleagues, we didn't even have computers. But have computers replaced us? We got trained in using computers. So it's the same thing, that somebody has to put in that effort to actually retrain and reskill to make sure that the transition is just transition and not an abrupt transition which leads to job losses. So the IEA numbers which I showed accommodate those jobs lost and how they're going to shift to renewable energy if proper training and proper reskilling programs are put in place. And again, these are not, this is not just unique to our energy industry. We have seen that in telecom industry and many other industries, and they have adjusted. And I think that's what the future is all about. Digital skills, which I mentioned, is absolutely critical to this job transition. So in any case, that kind of incremental training needs to take place. Now that shift now has to aim towards catering to the renewable energy, energy efficiency, e-mobility and hydrogen and whatnot, those jobs. And I think that's where, again, there has to be a lot of discussion between academic institutions, between companies, between utilities, between governments, and not in isolation. So this alliance, which I was talking about, is extremely important, because I think otherwise, yes, people will lose. Some people will lose if you don't think it right. And that's what has been an initial reaction with many of the coal-centric countries, the fossil-centric countries. But now, if you look at them, most of them are moving in that direction, because they've put in policies in place which make sure that nobody is losing jobs. I think it's not a trivial matter that my answer will solve this problem. But the point I'm saying is that this is a fundamental building block of clean energy transition. And we need to pay attention to this matter. Absolutely, very, very important.
Thank you, Ashok. It's a very fascinating discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I will try to wrap up, say a few closing comments. I'm not going to try to summarize, because this was a very rich discussion. I mean, I think the discussion was just as interesting as the presentation. So I would really like to thank the audience and the participants, who asked those very interesting questions. So I think in a nutshell, we saw, the very interesting presentation about the employment benefits of the energy transition. And the interesting part, I think, from the discussion is the policy implications. How can you make sure that you have the right training so that the jobs are high quality, they're permanent jobs? How do you encourage local manufacturing of equipment? And then we saw the important role played by the Green Energy Park here in Morocco, how they're focused on research and development, again, training, business development, how those are crucial to the renewable energy agenda in Morocco, and how, for example, they could encourage prototypes and the development of local technology in Morocco. And then we also, our big second topic was the e-mobility in the MENA region, in Morocco in particular, how this can help the decarbonization agenda, how it's linked to the renewable energy agenda, because in order to decarbonize, to have e-vehicles to have a positive impact on decarbonization, you need the electric grid, to be able to provide all the required energy, but also that energy to be clean. And we saw it's both. It provides challenges and opportunities for the MENA region. Opportunities for manufacturing of e-vehicles in Morocco. Morocco has a very successful car industry, and I think the next ambition, the next challenge, will be moving that car industry from thermal cars to electric vehicles. And so all the policy challenges that are associated also with the development of the use of e-vehicles in Morocco. For example, the policy changes that you need so that you can have charging stations, that they are able to charge for the service, as outlined by Professor Bouzazwa. So I would really like to thank all of you, thank all the panelists, thank Paul and Hisham for really authorizing this very interesting panel discussion. And I think the message to me is that, there is really a need to go deeper and to have more of these discussions. And so we really like to thank our partners at the University Mohammed VI Polytechnic, and all those working, also people working behind the scene that we haven't seen today, like Amina, Yassin, our colleague Munia. So thank you very much, and Eid Mubarak to all those who celebrate.
Eid al-Adha Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.